Hello, traveler. Welcome to Campfire Night Stories. Settle in and let the night grow quiet. Somewhere far away, a street lamp hums over neat brick houses and trimmed lawns. Inside one of them, beneath the stairs, a small cupboard holds a boy who knows every creak, every footstep, every way to stay unseen. The air is warm with dust and cleaning fluid. His name is spoken like an inconvenience. Yet strange things bend around him: water bursts, cloth shrinks, anger sparks, and July 31st waits, heavy with change. Soon, a train carries him forward. Steam, lantern light, watching eyes. Fame he never asked for. Choices he must make. A black lake rocks beneath him as a castle rises, blazing gold against the night. Candles float. A battered hat decides. Slytherin. Silence then measured applause. Not warmth, but possibility. Deep below the water, stone parts to reveal green-lit halls. A room of his own. A bed without locks. The lake breathing softly beyond the glass. For the first time, the boy rests. Not as a legend, just as Harry. The house at Number 4 sat in neat, silent obedience to the street around it. Its bricks were clean. Its curtains drawn just so. Its lawn sharply trimmed, every blade in line. Inside, the silence felt different. Not peaceful. Not warm. A quiet made of held breath and unspoken things. At the back of the house, past the tidy kitchen and the polished hallway, there was a small door with a bolt, low. Unimportant. Easy to overlook. Behind that door, in a space meant for brooms and broken things, a boy lay awake on a narrow mattress. Harry. 10 years old. Small for his age. All elbows, knobby knees, and dark hair that never quite behaved. He knew the sounds of this house better than his own heartbeat. The heavy tread of his uncle's steps. The sharp, hurried clipping of his aunt's heels. The thudding, stomping chaos that was his cousin. He knew the way the pipes groaned at night. The way the stairs creaked if you stepped on the third board from the top. The way the fridge door shut just a little too hard when Petunia thought of him. He knew when to move. When to vanish. When to be so still and so quiet that they could almost forget he existed. Most days, they did. Sometimes they remembered. When there were chores. When something went missing. When someone needed a place to put their anger. He had learned early that speaking rarely helped. Words made things worse. Questions, especially, were dangerous. So he watched instead. He listened. He let the world flow around him, and he tucked its pieces away. The neighbors called him polite. Quiet. A bit odd, that one, but no trouble. They did not see the cupboard. They did not see the meals passed over, forgotten, or taken away. They did not see the way his name was always said like something bitter on the tongue. "Boy, you. Get in here." Not Harry. He lay on his back now, staring up at the underside of the stairs. Shadows from the street lamp outside slipped through the slats and cut the darkness into crooked shapes. He traced them with his eyes. Lines. Angles. Patterns he had memorized 100 times before. He was tired, but he did not sleep. Sleep left him unguarded. Sleep meant waking up too slow if someone yanked the door open. So he listened to the soft hum of the house settling, to the distant, gentle thrum of a world that never seemed to have room for him. Sometimes, when he was alone like this, something inside him ached. Not like a bruise, not like a scrape, more like a question that had nowhere to go. Why here? Why them? Why him? He did not know much about himself. His birthday was a date with no candles, no presents, no cards. Just a number he had heard once, quickly, and never forgotten. His parents were a story told in one short, sharp line. Drunks, car crash. Nothing more to say. The first time he had asked about them, he had been very small. Petunia's mouth had gone tight. Vernon's face had turned a strange, heavy color. The next day, there had been extra chores. He had not asked again. But the questions did not vanish. They only went quiet. Like he had. He turned on his side, careful not to let the old mattress creak. Dust tickled his nose. The air was warm, stale, and faintly smelled of old wood and cleaning fluid. He closed his eyes. Images flickered in the dark. A flash of green he did not understand. A laugh he could not quite hear. A woman's voice, blurred by time, saying his name like it mattered. Harry. It always faded. It always slipped away the moment he reached for it. So he built a world in his mind instead. A world where someone, somewhere, had wanted him. A world where strange things that happened around him might mean something. Because strange things did happen. He had learned not to talk about them. Not even to himself. But they were there, tucked in the corners of his life like forgotten threads. A sweater shrinking 2 sizes when Dudley yanked it out of his hands. A broken toy mending itself after he stared at it, wishing hard enough that it hurt. A teacher's hair turning bright blue the very afternoon she accused him, wrongly, of cheating. He had not touched her. He had not done anything, not really. But that night, as he sat alone in his cupboard, he had whispered, "I didn't." And the next day, there it was. Blue as the sky. He had heard her shriek from down the corridor. He had seen the way every head turned. The way the other students stared. He had laughed once, softly, in his cupboard. Not because he meant her any harm, but because, for one brief moment, the world had shifted in his direction. Of course, the Dursleys had blamed him anyway. They always did. They yelled. They locked the door. They refused him dinner, then breakfast, as if hunger could scrub something out of him. He did not know what that something was, only that they feared it. Later, there had been the water. He remembered that day with a strange, sharp clarity. Petunia had shouted from the kitchen, dishes piling up, her voice thin and cold. "Get in here and wash these, boy." He had been tired. Angry, too, in that quiet way he never dared show. His hands had felt hot, his chest tight. He had walked to the sink, reached for the tap. Something inside him, small and tightly coiled, snapped. The faucet exploded in a burst of water. Not a drip. Not a trickle. A roaring, sudden rush that drenched the counters, the cupboards, the floor. Cold water soaked his shirt, plastered his hair to his forehead. It sprayed across the room, catching Petunia's shrill shout mid-word. For a second, there was only shock. Stunned silence. Droplets hanging in the air like glass. Then came the screaming. Vernon's rage. Petunia's horror. Dudley's delighted, mocking laughter from the doorway. He tried to say he didn't know how it had happened. The words felt useless, even as he spoke them. They didn't care. They never did. There had been no dinner that night, no breakfast the next day, and more than one heavy-handed shove. He could still feel the echo of that fear in his ribs when he thought about it. Lying in the dark now, he pulled his knees closer to his chest. The memory settled over him like another, heavier blanket. He did not tell himself it was all in his head. He had seen too much for that. He had felt too much. But he did not have a name for it either. No word for that strange tug in his gut when something changed. No language for the way the world sometimes bent, just a little, around his anger or his need. To the Dursleys, it was simple. Freakishness. Wrongness. Something to be beaten down, locked away, denied. So he learned to stay small, to swallow the anger, to bury the ache. Most days, it worked. Most days, the house stayed quiet. He did his chores. He kept his head down at school. He listened, answered when forced to, faded into the background when he could. He did well in his lessons. Top marks on tests. Neat writing, careful answers, a mind that caught details others missed. Teachers praised him. They wrote kind notes on his reports. The Dursleys did not care. Good marks were brushed aside. A passing mention, if that. As though any success of his had to be an accident. Dudley, on the other hand, could trip over his own feet and be rewarded. A single completed worksheet meant dessert. A lazy, half-hearted effort earned him cheers and claps. Harry watched it all with that same quiet, wondering gaze. Not because he envied the gifts, but because he did not understand what it felt like to be wanted for anything at all. In the stillness of his cupboard, he let the questions rise again. What if this wasn't it? What if there was something beyond these walls? Beyond this narrow, airless life? The thought was dangerous. He clung to it anyway. Above him, the house had gone still. Dudley was snoring. The television was silent. The kitchen lights off. Night had settled fully now. Thick. Soft. Heavy. Harry let his breathing slow. In, out. Measured and quiet. Somewhere, pressed under the thin mattress, he kept things. Little scraps of himself the Dursleys had not taken. An old bent birthday card someone had tossed out, blank inside, that he had claimed and pretended was his. A broken crayon, still good enough to draw faint lines on stolen scraps of paper. A button that had no purpose, but felt like treasure simply because it was his and no one else's. He did not reach for them now. It was enough to know they were there. Hidden. Safe. Tomorrow would be another day of the same. He knew that. He felt it settling on his shoulders even before the sun rose. He did not know yet that the morning would bring something else. A knock. A voice. A name spoken without anger. He did not know that, in less than 24 hours, everything he understood about himself would begin to unravel. For now, he was only a boy in the dark. Unremarkable. Uncelebrated. Unknown. But the world beyond Privet Drive was turning. Quietly. Steadily. And somewhere, far from the cramped cupboard and its thin mattress, someone had remembered the date. Someone had marked it on a calendar that did not hang in any ordinary kitchen. July 31st. A birthday with no cake. No candles. No whispered wishes. Not yet. Harry shifted, exhaled, and at last his eyes began to grow heavy. The darkness softened at the edges. The lines of the stairs above him blurred. He did not see the faint, restless shiver of something just beyond the ordinary, waiting. He did not hear the quiet rustle of plans long laid beginning to move. He only knew the ache in his chest, the hum of the house, the soft, stubborn hope that maybe, one day, things might be different. Outside, the night held its breath. And somewhere very far from Number 4, a man with a long white beard adjusted his robes, checked the time, and smiled to himself. The one-maker's shop still clung to him. The dust. The shadowed shelves. The sharp, bright moment when the holly wand had leapt into his hand and the world had flooded with warmth. And then, the words. Brother. Dark Wizard. Great, but terrible. They followed him out of the narrow shop. They rode with him through the tug of apparition back to the neat gray box of Number 4. They lingered when Dumbledore's hand left his shoulder and the front step of Privet Drive rose beneath his feet. If I share a wand with him? The question had burned its way up his throat. Quiet, cracked, heavier than his new trunk. What if I turn out the same? What if the story ends where his began? Dumbledore had answered without flinching. No softly. No pat on the head. We are not defined by what we are given, only by what we choose. The words lodged somewhere deep. Unfamiliar. Almost painful. Someone was telling him he had a choice. That he wasn't just a shadow cast by someone else's name. Now, weeks later, the memory still sat in his chest like a small, steady ember. The world had cracked open around him since then. Letters. Owls. Keys that turned in locks only he could see. Streets that twisted away from the ordinary and spilled into the impossible. But inside his head, the noise hadn't stopped. Boy who lived. Whispered in Diagon Alley. Murmured behind raised newspapers. Eyes following him the way they never had in Little Whinging, and yet somehow it felt worse. He hadn't done anything. He hadn't been brave. He hadn't even been awake to remember it. They were applauding a blank space in his memory, clapping for a story he couldn't see. And beneath it all, like a second heartbeat, Brother Wand, darkest wizard of the age. The Hogwarts Express rattled and swayed beneath his feet as he edged down the corridor. Voices spilled from every compartment. Laughter. Shouts. The hiss of sweets being unwrapped. Somewhere between the chatter and the steam, his name kept surfacing. Not spoken to him. Around him. Harry Potter. There, that one. He kept his eyes down. Shoulders tight. Hands wrapped around the handle of his trunk until his knuckles ached. He passed one compartment, 2, 3. Faces turned. Looking. Measuring him against whatever legend they'd been told. Scar. Glasses. Small. That's it, is less than Hasson. Ling Jinghao Dai Yu. He pushed further back, where the train grew quieter and the doors stayed mostly closed. He found an empty compartment near the end and slipped inside as if diving under the surface of a cold lake. The door slid shut with a merciful click. The hum of the corridor dulled to a muffled blur. Harry let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He set Hedwig's cage carefully on the seat. Her golden eyes blinked at him, calm and knowing. "Just us for a bit," he muttered. The train shuddered, then lurched into motion. Outside, the platform began to roll away, faces smearing into color and steam. He sat. Back to the corner. Trunk pulled close, as if someone might still decide it wasn't really his. From the top of the pile, he drew a book with careful fingers. Hogwarts, a history. He'd only meant to skim through it over the summer. A few pages here and there, between punishments and locked doors. But the more he read, the harder it had been to stop. Castles that moved. Staircases that shifted. Portraits that talked back. A world built for people like him. named, known, expected. His eyes had devoured every line. He'd traced the map in his mind until he could almost walk those halls in his sleep. Now, cradled by the clacking rhythm of the train, he opened the book again. The words rose to meet him like old friends. He had just settled into the comfort of ancient stone and enchanted ceilings when the compartment door slid open. A girl stood there. Dark hair neat. Robes already straightened. Cool gray eyes that missed nothing. He remembered her. Measuring robes. Pinned hems. An appraising gaze that seemed to cut straight through him. "Everywhere else is full," she said, voice smooth, composed. "Mind if I sit?" "Ali?" He knew it instinctively. There had been empty compartments all along his trek down the train. But she was here, choosing this one. He shrugged once. "Sure." She stepped in, easy as walking into a room she already owned, and took the seat opposite him. Her trunk slid under the bench with a practiced nudge of her foot. For a moment, they just sat. The train rattled. Hedwig ruffled her feathers. Then the girl opened a book of her own. The cover was worn, the spine creased from use. Harry watched her for half a second. The steady way her eyes moved. The way her face remained unreadable, even relaxed. He looked back down at his own pages. If she wanted silence, he could give it. Silence was the one thing he had always had in abundance. Time slipped by in the soft scratch of turning pages and the low thunder of the train. Landscape blurred past the window's fields, hedges, the occasional flash of water. Eventually, the trolley came. The door rattled open again, pushed by a kindly woman with a cart full of color and sugar. Harry's hand had gone automatically to his pocket, to the familiar nothing of loose threads and lint. Then he'd remembered. He had money now, his own. Gold that clinked in a pouch tucked safely away. He bought more than he'd meant to. Curiosity, he told himself. Research. Chocolate frogs that leapt. Bertie Bott's beans with their lurking dangers. Fizzing Whizbees, pumpkin pasties, things with names that meant nothing and everything at once. Across from him, the girl Daphne, he recalled, chose more carefully. Measured. Deliberate. When the cart rattled away, the compartment settled back into quiet. For a time, he felt her eyes on him before she spoke. A soft wait, considering. Not the greedy stare of the alley. Sharper. You hate it, don't you? He glanced up, a chocolate frog halfway unwrapped in his hand. Hate what? The stares. She said it as if it were an answer, not a question. I saw you in the alley. I've seen you here. You try to fold into the corners. His brow furrowed. That was accurate. Uncomfortably so. Is that what you meant? He asked slowly. Back at Madame Malkin's, when you said I was different than you expected. Her gaze slid briefly to the window, where gray sky and countryside fled past. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she tipped her head once. Yes. Most people would love it. The story. The name. The power that apparently came just from existing. But he flinched from it, like light too bright after a lifetime in the dark. "You look disgusted," she said calmly, "by the attention, the fame." The words settled between them like something sour. Harry shifted, the bench hard beneath him, the compartment suddenly too small. She'd peeled him open with 2 sentences, and he didn't know what to do with that. He took a breath, another. "It's cruel," he said at last. The truth surprised him as it left his mouth. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I get the recognition. I get the stories, the whispers." His voice cooled as he went on. "But I didn't do anything. My parents." The word caught, just for a heartbeat. "Died, were murdered, protecting me, and people want me to love the attention?" His fingers curled around the edge of his book. "If I'm going to be seen, I want it to be for something I actually did, not for something I can't even remember." Silence followed. Thick. Thoughtful. Daphne's book lay forgotten in her lap. Her gray eyes were no longer distant, no longer testing. They were focused now. Sharp. He saw no pity there. Only interest. A cool, bright curiosity, like someone examining a puzzle with more pieces than expected. "You continue to surprise me, Potter," she said quietly. His name sounded different in her mouth. Not reverent. Not fearful. Balanced. "You don't think or act like the Gryffindor I was expecting." He tilted his head. "Gryffindor?" Her mouth curved into a small, knowing smirk. Brash, loud, reckless, addicted to applause. That's the picture most of us are given. Her gaze flicked over him. "That isn't you." "And what?" he asked, half wary, half intrigued. "Do you think I act like?" The smirk deepened, subtle and sharp. "Slytherin, of course." Before he could decide how he felt about that, the compartment door slid open yet again. This time, the presence in the doorway seemed to arrive with its own air. Confident. Entitled. Hair like pale metal, slicked back perfectly. Gray eyes, cool and weighing. A prefect's badge gleamed on his chest, not his, but he wore his own inheritance just as boldly. "Fancy seeing you here, Greengrass," he drawled. His gaze skimmed over her, then landed on Harry. "And you too, Potter." Something inside Harry tightened. "Malfoy." The name rang like a faint bell in his head. Unfinished stories. Half-heard mutters from adults who lowered their voices when he entered a room. He filed it away. Later, he would look it up. Names mattered. He was beginning to learn. "Malfoy?" Daphne returned, voice edged like a well-honed blade. The boy's lips twitched. Faintly amused. Faintly dismissive. Harry inclined his head, matching the polished courtesy he'd seen in Gringotts and Diagon Alley. "Pleased to meet you," he said evenly. Malfoy's eyes sharpened at the tone. Not fawning. Not cowed. Measured. He gave a short nod in return, a silent acknowledgement of some kind of game just begun. Then, with one last assessing glance between Harry and Daphne, he turned away. The door slid shut behind him. "I take it you know him," Harry said, once the footsteps faded down the corridor. "Unfortunately." Daphne's answer was dry, precise. "Our families move in the same circles. His father likes to think the sun rises where he points." She adjusted the cuff of her sleeve. "Trust me, there are far better friends to make than Malfoy." Her attention drifted back to her book, the subject closed for now. Harry let it rest. There would be time. There would be a library. He returned to Hogwarts, a history. To towers and turrets and moving portraits. To lists of founders and houses and the strange, intricate web of a school that had existed long before him and would go on long after. The hours blurred. Words turned to images in his mind, long tables glittering with food, ghosts drifting through ancient stone, a ceiling charmed to mirror the sky. Eventually, the spell broke with a knock on the compartment door. An older student slid it open, wearing a badge polished to a shine. "We'll be arriving soon," the prefect announced. "Get your robes on." Harry pushed himself to his feet, heart giving a small, unexpected jolt. Arriving. The word tasted like the end of one life and the hesitant beginning of another. "I'll change," he said, stepping past Daphne and out into the narrow corridor. He found an empty stretch between compartments, wrestled his way into the black robes, fingers clumsy with haste and something like nerves. The fabric felt strange against his skin. He looked at his reflection in the small window robes, slightly too long, tie a bit crooked, hair hopeless as ever. He didn't look like anyone important. He looked like a boy, trying on a story he hadn't chosen. Back in the compartment, Daphne was already dressed. Her robes hung perfectly, every button aligned. They gathered their things with a quiet efficiency born of very different homes, and then the train shuddered beneath them. Brakes screamed. The motion slowed, then stopped. Hedwig hooted once, displeased at the jolt. Harry soothed her through the bars of the cage, then hefted his trunk again. The compartment door opened to a rush of sound and cool air. They stepped down onto the platform together. Night had settled over the station, crisp and chill. Lanterns swung in the dark, casting pools of gold on stone and steam. Voices rose and fell around them, hundreds of them now. And over it all, a booming call. "Fur's years! Fur's years over here!" The crowd parted around the source of the shout. A giant of a man. Wild beard, broad shoulders, arms like tree trunks, waving them closer. Harry felt the old, familiar urge to shrink back, to disappear. Instead, he tightened his grip on his trunk and walked toward the voice. Daphne moved at his side, calm as ever. they were herded down a path and out onto the edge of a dark lake. Dozens of small boats bobbed gently, lanterns perched on their prows. "No more than 4 to a boat," the giant called. In the swirl of bodies and breath and cloak hems, Harry and Daphne were pushed toward one craft. Malfoy materialized there as if he'd been waiting. Beside him loomed Goyle, thick-set and silent. The boat rocked as they climbed in. Water lapped at the sides, black and cold. Malfoy's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Don't expect the castle to bow down to you, Potter," he drawled. "Fame helps, but here, it doesn't matter." Something steadied inside Harry. The old Privet Drive quiet. The cupboard calm. He met Malfoy's gaze without flinching. "Then I suppose your name won't get you very far either," he answered, voice cool as the lake around them. Daphne's lips twitched once, almost invisible. Goyle grunted, confused. Before Malfoy could conjure a reply, the boats began to move. No oars. No hands. Just a smooth, gliding pull that set the lanterns trembling. They rounded a bend in the cliff face. The night drew in close for a heartbeat rock on one side, dark water on the other. And then, the world opened. The castle rose from the mountainside like something pulled from Harry's dreams. Towers speared the sky. Windows burned with warm light. Flag-top turrets pierced the clouds, and high above, faint against the night, owls wheeled in silent arcs. The sight punched the breath from his lungs. Words fell away. Beside him, Malfoy's snide composure cracked, just a little. His mouth parted. Across from him, Daphne's eyes widened, cool mask melting into open wonder. For once, all 3 of them were the same. 3 children in a rocking boat, staring up at a world that did not care where they had slept last night or what their names had meant yesterday. The castle shone above them. Ancien. Waiting. Harry felt the warmth of the holly wand at his side. Felt the echo of Dumbledore's words. We are not defined by what we are given. The boat slid onward toward a low archway and a flicker of torchlight beyond. Toward stone steps and a great oak door and whatever lay waiting behind it. Harry watched the reflected towers shiver in the lake, then lift his gaze back to the real thing. Somewhere inside those walls, his life would begin to belong to him. Not to a scar. Not to a story told by others. Just Harry. For now, as the boats drew closer, that was enough. High above the black water, the castle waited. It clung to the cliff like something carved from the night itself. Towers speared upward, reaching for the scattered stars. Hundreds of windows burned with soft, golden light. Their reflections trembled across the lake. Shards of fire on ink. The chatter of the first years died away. Or still. Even breath seemed to quiet. Harry tipped his head back. Let the sight fill his vision. It was bigger than the drawings in his book. Sharper than his imagination. Solid and old and watching. The walls were dark stone, weathered and unyielding. They looked like they had seen wars and winters and children just like him for 1,000 years or more. He felt small beneath it. Insignificant. Like a single dot on a page the castle had been writing forever. But the feeling didn't hollow him out. Didn't make him want to run. Instead, something coiled tight inside. Quiet. Resolute. This would be the place. His proving ground. The stage he had been handed, whether he wanted it or not. He would not waste it. The boat slid into a shadowed opening at the base of the cliff. Cold air breathed over them, smelling of damp stone and river weeds. They bumped gently against an underground dock. Lights glowed along the walls. Chains clinked in the dark. "Out you get," the giant man rumbled. Harry stepped onto the slick stone and followed the surge of first years. Cloaks whispered. Shoes scraped. They trailed behind the enormous figure through a low tunnel and up a flight of worn steps. At the top, they emerged into a small chamber, torches flickering against ancient masonry. Ahead stood a door. Tall. Thick. Carved oak banded with iron. Before it, straight-backed and waiting, stood a woman. Her hair was pinned tight. Her robe severe. Her gaze sharp enough to cut. Lines etched her face, not from softness, but from years of disapproval. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she said. Her voice was clear. Precisi. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly. Before you may take your seats in the Great Hall, you must first be sorted into your houses." A ripple went through the crowd. Whispers. Shifts of weight. Harry kept his eyes on her. On the way she held herself like she was part of the stone, not just standing in front of it. "The sorting is no trivial formality," she continued. "It will shape your experience here." She let the words hang. Measured the room with a level stare. "Your house will be like a family within these walls. You will share classes, dormitories, and a common room. There are 4: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each with its own history, each with its own legacy of witches and wizards known throughout our world." The names felt familiar and strange all at once. Words he'd read dozens of times, now about to be written on him. "Your achievements will earn your house points," she went on. "Your failures or breaches of the rules will cost them. At the end of the year, the house with the most points will be awarded the House Cup." Her mouth thinned slightly. "I trust you will strive to be a credit to whichever house you join." Then she was silent. So was the room. Harry became acutely aware of the light. The torches cast a wavering greenish glow across the stone. Shadows gathered in the corners, long and thin. Faces of other children shifted, pale, nervous, eager. His own pulse thudded in his ears. He knew the stories. He'd read them until the pages blurred. Bravery. Loyalty. wisdom. Ambition. 4 banners. 4 ways of being seen. Gryffindor. His parents' house. The house of roaring courage and reckless leaps. He imagined standing beneath a crimson banner. Applause. Eyes on him. He swallowed, is less than Hasson. Lingxing hao dayu. He could admire courage. He wasn't sure he wanted to live in the middle of it. Ravenclaw had tempted him on the page. Question. Books. People who valued the why as much as the what. He liked learning. He liked understanding. But was that the center of him? Hufflepuff sounded kind. A steady sort of warmth. Work done because it needed doing, not because someone was watching. There was something comforting in that. A house where loyalty mattered more than legend. And then there was Slytherin. Cunning. Ambition. Resourcefulness. Traits that, in his head, had once sounded like warnings. Now they felt like tools. He thought of the cupboard. Of the years he'd spent making himself small, unnoticed, in order to survive. He had never been loud. Never been the sort to charge forward without thinking. But he had watched. Planned. Slipped around danger when he could, and endured it when he couldn't. He wanted more now. More than the hushed title strangers gave him. More than a scar and a night he couldn't remember. He wanted to become something he chose. Not something that had happened to him as a baby. Slytherin whispered to that part of him. The part that craved control. Sharpness. A way to never again be a helpless boy in a dark cupboard. He shifted his weight, a prickle at the back of his neck. Soon, wondering would end. He would walk out of this waiting space with a color on his chest and a table to sit at. The stern woman disappeared through the big doors. Murmurs rose. Died. When she returned, her expression hadn't softened by a fraction. "Form a line," she ordered. Alphabetical order, by surname. No room for argument. No room for confusion. The crowd broke and reformed. A jagged stream straightening into something like order. Harry found his place somewhere in the middle. Bodies pressed close around him. 100 little tensions humming in the air. The doors to the great hall swung open. Light spilled out. Varm. Dazzling after the close gloom. The line began to move. Slow. Step by step. As they entered, the sound hit him first. A vast murmur of voices. Cutlery clinking. The faint whoosh of candles floating high above. He barely saw the enchanted ceiling. Barely registered the glitter of plates and the sweep of 4 long tables. His eyes were dragged toward the front instead. To the stool. To the battered, shapeless hat resting on it like a trap disguised as something harmless. Names were called. One after another. voices rose from the great crowd. Cheering. Polite clapping. Occasional boos quickly shushed. At first, Harry heard nothing but his own heartbeat. The words blurred into a meaningless list. Bones, Susan. He caught the tail end. A plump girl shuffled forward, cheeks pink. Hufflepuff. Applause rolled from one of the tables, warm as their yellow ties. Davis, Tracy. A dark-haired girl took her seat beneath the hat. Slytherin. Green and silver banners flickered as that table clapped. Kula. Controlled. Harry's palms were damp. He wiped them on his robes, eyes fixed on the hat. It looked tattered. Ordinary. He knew better now than to trust what things looked like. A familiar name snapped his drifting mind back into focus. Greengrass, Daphne. She stepped out of the line with the same measured grace she had worn at Madame Malkin's. Her back straight. Her chin lifted just enough. She sat. The hat sank over her sleek dark hair, swallowing her eyes. For a breath, nothing happened. Then the brim split. Slytherin. The green and silver table responded with a composed applause. No shouting. No pounding on the wood. Daphne slid from the stool and walked toward them, every step precise. Harry watched her sit. Watched the way the older students made space for her without fuss. The line shrank. Name after name vanished into house colors and new beginnings. Longbottom Neville is less than Hasson. Ling Jinghao, Dayu. The boy he'd met on the train stumbled forward, nearly tangling himself in his own robes. Round face flushed. Hands fidgeting. The hat took its time. Far longer than it had with most others. Neville sat there, still as he could manage. Harry couldn't look away. Something brushed against his thoughts. A low whisper, not from the hat, not from anyone. Pay attention. His skin prickled. Neville looked ordinary. Frightened. Yet something in Harry's bones insisted this boy mattered. He had no proof. No reason. Only a quiet certainty that lodged itself alongside Dumbledore's words. Finally, the hat shouted a house. The hall reacted. Neville stumbled toward his new table, looking very much like he expected the floor to swallow him. Harry's chest tightened. Not in pity. In recognition. Then, Potter Harry. The world narrowed. Sound blurred. He walked because not walking would have been worse. Steps slow, deliberate, carrying him past hundreds of staring faces. The name whispered around the room like a gust of cold air. Potter. 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 He climbed the little platform, sat on the too-high stool, and tried to force his hands to be still. The hat dropped over his eyes. Darkness swallowed the hall. He smelled dust. something like old parchment and older magic. Such drive and determination for one so young, a voice rasped inside his head. Harry froze. The words hadn't touched his ears. They echoed directly through his thoughts. "You wish to prove yourself," the hat mused. "The ambition you carry, quite remarkable. You burn with it. You want more than the stairs, more than that cramped little life behind those dull suburban walls. You want to be known as yourself." His throat clicked dryly. "What are you?" he thought, the question small, tight. The hat chuckled. The sound was like fabric dragging across stone. "I am the Sorting Hat. I see what you are, and what you may yet be." It sifted through him. Memories. Flares of anger. Cold, careful plans. "Slytherin would fit you well," it murmured. "You have the hunger, the cleverness, the instinct to survive and to rise. Salazar himself would have approved." A wave of nausea rolled through Harry. He saw Draco's pale smirk on the train. The casual arrogance. The weight of the name he'd worn like armor. Did Harry really want to sit at the same table as boys like that? But then another image slid in. Daphne in the robe shop, cool and composed. Daphne in the boat, eyes bright with quiet curiosity. She had claimed Slytherin as if it were obvious. Natural. She hadn't seemed cruel. The hat huffed a soft laugh. "Is less than Hasson. Ling ging hao dayu." Quite right. One snake does not define the whole nest. Slytherin can be a forge as much as a pit. It would give you the means to become more than a legend, more than a frightened child in a cupboard, to shape your own story. Harry's heart hammered against his ribs. He thought of Dumbledore's calm gaze. "We are what we choose." He drew a breath, deep as the hat would let him. "Then put me," he thought carefully, "where I have the best chance to build the future I need." A pause. The sense of something weighing options. Paths. "Very well, Potter," the hat said at last. "Slytherin will hone you. You will find sharp minds there, and sharper blades. Allies and enemies both worth your attention. It will not be gentle, but greatness rarely is." Then, aloud, it roared. "Slytherin!" The word burst against his ears. The darkness tore away as the hat lifted. The great hall had fallen silent. Utterly. Hundreds of faces stared at him. Shock. Confusion. For some, something like horror. The boy who lived. In green. His legs felt unsteady as he slid from the stool. He forced himself upright. Shoulders back. Chin level. He walked toward the Slytherin table. Each step a small act of defiance against the weight of their expectations. For a few awful seconds, there was almost no sound. Then, at the staff table, Dumbledore began to clap. Slow. Deliberate. The noise spread outward. Teachers. Then scattered students. Then more. It was never thunderous. but it was enough to break the silence. Harry took his place on the bench across from Daphne. Her eyes studied him, cool and bright. "You really aren't what I expected, Potter," she said quietly. A short breath of amusement escaped him. "That's twice now you've been wrong about me, Greengrass." One dark brow lifted. The corner of her mouth curled, fleeting. Then her gaze slid back toward the stool as the next name was called. "Zabini, Blaise." The boy strolled up, gaze half-lidded, posture relaxed. The hat brushed his head. "Slytherin." Green and silver answered at once this time. Applause rose easily. "Practiced." Harry felt the difference like a stone in his pocket. They had hesitated for him. Needed prompting. His choice, no, the hat's declaration, his agreement suddenly seemed heavier. Sharper-edged. Dumbledore rose to speak once the last first year had been claimed by a table. Spectacles glinting, eyes alight with that strange, secretive humor. "Welcome, welcome to a new year at Hogwarts." His voice rolled over the hall, rich and oddly playful. "Before we begin our feast, I would like to say a few words, and here they are. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak is less than Hasson. Ling Jing Hao Da Yu. Silence." A beat. Harry stared. He wasn't sure what he had expected from the most powerful wizard he'd ever met. It wasn't that. He leaned toward Daphne, brows knitting. "Is he always like this?" he muttered. "When I met him, he seemed normal." A faint spark of amusement flashed in her eyes. "No one knows," she replied under her breath, "and I, for one, don't intend to be the one to ask." Dumbledore clapped his hands once. Sound cracked through the hall. Food appeared. Not in dribbles or stages, but all at once. Platters materialized along the tables. Roasted meats glistened with juice. Mounds of golden potatoes steamed. Bowls brimmed with thick, dark gravy. Baskets overflowed with still warm bread. Harry's jaw loosened. He had never seen so much food in one place. Not at Christmas. Not at birthdays that hadn't been his. His stomach growled, loud enough that he felt heat rise in his cheeks. He reached for whatever his hands could find. Chicken. Potatoes. A ladle of gravy that nearly overflowed his plate. Across from him, Daphne served herself with careful restraint. A slice, not a heap. A measured spoon, not a flood. Every movement economical. Controlled. Voices rose around them. Laughter. The soft crackle of conversation as first years tested the waters with older students. Harry could feel eyes land on him, slide away, sneak back. Hear his name darting from mouth to mouth. It buzzed at the edges of his awareness. Irritating. Insistent. But the food was warm. The hall was bright without being cruel. The ceiling above shimmered with stars, gentle and distant. A strange calm washed over him. Not the flat, numb quiet of the cupboard. Something else. Space. This place was huge, layered with corridors and rooms and secrets. He could vanish into it if he wished. Disappear for an afternoon. An evening. No fists on doors. No shrill voices screeching his name. He could, finally, choose when to be seen. The thought settled in his chest like a soft weight. Comforting. Time blurred between bites, between glances at the other tables, between the tiny, wary exchanges among the Slytherin first years. Eventually, Dumbledore rose again. The hall hushed on instinct. "Now that you are all watered and fed," he began, smile faintly mischievous, "a few start-of-term notices." His gaze swept the hall. Light caught in his lenses. First, the Forbidden Forest is, as its name suggests, forbidden to all students. A murmure. Nervous laughter. Second, he continued, voice losing none of its warmth as it sharpened, the corridor on the third floor, right-hand side, is strictly out of bounds to anyone who does not wish to meet a most unpleasant end. His eyes paused. Just for a heartbeat. On Harry. A chill traced down Harry's spine. The words were almost playful. The intent beneath them was not. "This warning is given once," Dumbledore finished quietly. "Remember it." He let that hang, then brightened. "Lastly, Quidditch trials will be held within the next fortnight. Those interested should speak with Madam Hooch. Now, off to your dormitories. Sleep well." Benches scraped. Chairs groaned. The hall broke into 4 streams. Harry fell into step with the other Slytherins. 2 older students at the front wore shiny silver badges. Prefects. They led the way out of the hall and down. The air cooled as they descended. The light shifted from warm gold to a faint, watery green. Stone staircases curled downward, twisting them into the bowels of the castle. Torch brackets flickered with green-tinted flames, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. Their footsteps echoed in long, empty corridors. The castle above seemed to fade into legend, replaced by this quieter, colder underbelly. At last, they stopped before what looked like nothing at all. Just a stretch of blank, damp wall. The shorter prefect turned, his expression calm and firm. "Our common room entrance is here," he said. "Beyond it, you'll find your dormitories. The password changes every 2 weeks. It will be posted on the notice wall. Currently, it is Pure Ambition." His eyes swept over the first years. Dark. Assessing. Do not rely on others to save you if you forget it. The words hung in the chill air. A simple instruction. And beneath it, a lesson. Here, you kept up. Or you were left outside. The wall rippled. Stone trembled like something alive. Then it sagged, softened, and folded inward. What had been solid rock a moment before sank away, unveiling an archway. Wide. carved from the same dark stone, faintly veined with age. Its edges glowed, a soft, eerie green, like light filtering through deep water. The prefect stepped through first. The other Slytherins followed. Harry moved with them, eyes flicking over every detail. Inside, the air changed. Cooler. Denser. The first-year dormitories are on your left, the prefect said. Quick, efficient. Not unkind, just brisk. He gestured toward a shallow passage branching off. Here is the common room. The notice wall is there. Passwords, schedules, house announcements. If you don't check it, you'll miss things. No one will chase you. His gaze brushed over them. A reminder. Not a threat. Harry let the words sink in. Keep up. No one will pick you up if you fall behind. He stepped forward into the Slytherin common room, is less than his own. 领井号大鱼. It was long and low and quiet. The ceiling pressed down in smooth, dark stone. Green lanterns hung at intervals, their glass deep and cloudy. They bathed the room in a muted, underwater glow. Shadows gathered thick in the corners. Not menacing. Just there. Along one wall, round windows glimmered. Not clear glass. Thick. Clouded with age and pressure. Beyond them, blackness. Shifting. The depths of the lake churned against the outer wall. Soft currents dragged threads of weed past the panes. Occasional bubbles slid upward, pale ghosts vanishing into the gloom. The furniture matched the room's mood. Long, low-backed sofas in dark leather. Their surfaces slightly worn, as if countless students had draped themselves there over the years. Heavy chairs with carved wooden arms. Tables thick as tree stumps, polished to a subtle sheen. Here and there, glints of silver caught the green light. Inlaid in wood. Edging the lamps. Tracing patterns like snakes and vines along the mantelpiece of a distant fireplace. Harry turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. It was nothing like the bright, noisy pictures he'd imagined when he'd read about house common rooms. This felt older, quieter, more secret. He found he didn't mind the dimness. It reminded him a little of small spaces he had once hidden in. Cupboards. Empty classrooms at primary school. But this was different. No one here wanted him locked away. The shadows weren't a punishment. They were a choice. After one more glance at the windows, he drifted toward the corridor the prefect had indicated. The dormitories branched off in two clear paths. A modest sign spelled it out: boys to the right, girls to the left. Within the boys' passage, doors lined the wall. Each one bore a small silver plate, engraved with a name in neat script. Harry's heart gave a small, strange jump. Anama. His name. Not scrawled in marker on a spare school jumper. Not shouted from the bottom of the stairs. Carved. Fixed He traced the corridor until he saw it. Harry Potter, etched cleanly into the metal. Centered. Certain. His hand hesitated a bare second before curling around the handle. He pushed the door open. The room beyond was not large. Not grand. But it was his. A four-poster bed took up most of one wall. Heavy pillars. Dark wood. Green curtains drawn back for now, hanging in clean folds. The mattress looked thick. Inviting. Covered in deep green bedding, edged in silver braid. At the foot of the bed sat his trunk. Worn. Familiar now. Someone had carried it all the way down here for him. Placed it where it belonged, as if they assumed he had a place. Beside the bed stood a narrow wardrobe. Its surface glowed softly under the lantern light, polished smooth. A small bedside table waited next to the pillow. Empty. Ready to hold whatever he decided mattered enough to keep within reach. Simple. Uncluttered. To anyone else, it might have seemed almost plain. To Harry, it felt vast. Luxurious. A room. His own room. 4 walls and a bed that belonged to him. No spiders in the corners. No cleaning supplies scratching against the door. No key on someone else's belt. He stepped in fully and let the door fall shut behind him. The sounds of the common room faded to a low, distant murmur. Another sound slid into their place. A soft, steady rhythm. He stilled, listening. There. Beyond the stone, beyond the windowless wall, the black lake moved. Slow waves pressed against the castle's foundation. Water lapped at rock with a muffled hush. It wasn't loud. Just constant. Like breathing. He crossed to the wall and laid his palm flat against the cool stone. He couldn't feel the water. But knowing it was there, dark, deep, endless, wrapped around the dungeon like a cloak, it settled something inside him. A strange, enclosed safety. Hidden, but not trapped. He sat on the edge of his bed. The mattress dipped under his weight, soft and firm at once. For a second, he just stared at his own hands. At the faint scars, the calluses. So much had happened in a single day. Once, boats. An impossible ceiling. A hat that spoke inside his head and declared his path to the whole school. The memory of its voice brushed against him again. So much ambition. So much hunger to be more. He'd never put those words to himself before. At the Dursleys, wanting had been dangerous. Dreaming had been something you did in the cracks, when no one was watching. He lay back slowly, staring at the stone ceiling. The sorting hat had looked inside him, turned over his thoughts like pages. It had seen things he had barely admitted to himself. A burning wish not to be helpless again. A refusal to let his life be only that one night, and that one curse. "Greatness," it had said. The word sat uneasily on his chest. Voldemort was called great, too. Terrible, but great. The idea made his stomach twist. He closed his eyes. He saw again the flash of green light he didn't actually remember, only imagined. He saw a wand that matched his. He heard Ollivander's voice, thin and reedy, talking about shared cores and strange destinies. He felt again the prickle of fear. The thought that perhaps, buried somewhere deep, he might be too much like the man who had killed his parents. But then Dumbledore's voice slid gently over that darkness. "We are what we choose." Harry breathed out. Slow. The castle stones seemed to breathe with him. Above him, an entire world of towers and corridors and staircases. Around him, a house with a sharp reputation, waiting to see what he would become. He didn't know what kind of future the hat had glimpsed for him. Something powerful. Something that would matter. He couldn't control prophecies or wand cores or the stories other people told about his scar. But he could control this. His choices. His steps. If he was truly meant for anything like greatness, then it would not be built on fear and cruelty. Not on the kind of power that left bodies behind and burned children's names into history. He thought of the Dursleys' tight smiles and locked doors, of Dudley's fists and Vernon's shouts. He thought of nights spent in his cupboard, whispering to himself that the world might be wider than that house. He didn't know much yet about this world, about himself. But he knew one thing. He would not become a shadow of Voldemort. He would not be a weapon in someone else's hand. Whatever greatness meant for him, he would carve it along a different line. He would help where he could. He would fight when he had to. He would protect the small, frightened boy he had once been in every other child he met who looked the same way. On his own terms. Slowly, the tightness in his chest eased. The Black Lake's quiet rhythm filled the room, steady as a heartbeat. The dungeon air held a faint hint of damp stone and cool earth. Far away, footsteps echoed once, then faded. A door shut somewhere down the corridor. Harry shifted up onto his side, drew his knees slightly in, and let the heavy curtains fall around his bed with a soft rustle. Green fabric framed a small private kingdom. A space no one could snatch away for simple convenience. He could almost imagine the room remembering him, folding his presence into its long history of names and faces. Outside, lanterns burned low. The common room would be emptying, voices thinning to the occasional murmur. Tomorrow, classes would begin. Teachers' names to learn. Corridors to map. Housemates to decode. Allies to find. The school would watch him. Whispers would follow him down stone staircases and past portraits that pretended not to listen. He couldn't change that. But here, for this one quiet night, he didn't have to be the boy who lived. He was simply Harry, 11 years old. In a cold, dark, secret room beneath an ancient castle. a boy with a bed of his own for the first time, with a door that bore his name, with a future that whatever else it held would be shaped by his hands. His lashes lowered. The green light behind the curtains thinned, blurred, then softened into darkness. The lake sighed against the stone. The castle settled around him. In the heart of Slytherin's quiet, hidden hall, Harry let his thoughts unwind. Let the day drain from his bones. Sleep came slowly, gently. Not the exhausted collapse of someone trying to escape waking life, but the gradual loosening of a boy who, at last, felt the faint outline of safety. He drifted under, cradled by cool stone, dark water, and the first fragile sense that this place might become something like home.